"Happy birthday to me," I whispered, staring out the car window as Boston's streets rushed by in a blur. 73 years old today. And here I was, in my favorite blue dress and pearl earrings, Henry's last gifts to me before cancer took him 5 years ago. His old watch felt heavy on my wrist, a constant reminder of him. My son David had promised me the best birthday lunch ever, but something in my gut told me this day wasn't going the way I expected. "You're quiet back there, Martha," Melissa, my daughter-in-law, said in her sugary voice, turning in her seat. Not a single hair on her perfectly styled blonde head was out of place, and her smile looked more like a mask than anything real. "Excited about your surprise?" After 40 years in real estate, I could read people like open books. Melissa's white-knuckle grip on her designer purse and the quick glance she traded with David made my stomach tighten. Something was off. "Every birthday is a blessing at my age," I said, letting my voice sound weaker than I felt. They expected a helpless old lady. I played the part. "Though I am curious, why did we drive past Giovanni's? I thought that was my tradition." David's hands tightened on the wheel. "Change of plans, Mom. Something better." We turned down a fancy driveway lined with maple trees, and my heart dropped. A large sign came into view: Golden Sunset Retirement Community. Not just any home, my home. The jewel of Wilson Properties, the company I'd secretly built after Henry's death. "What's this?" I asked, trying to sound confused while my brain raced. Did they know? No. Impossible. I'd hidden my ownership through shell companies and lawyers. No one, not even my family, knew I owned this place, along with 12 others across New England. David parked and turned toward me with fake sympathy. "Mom, we've been worried. The forgetfulness, the confusion. It's not safe for you to live alone anymore." "What forgetfulness?" I snapped, real anger slipping through. "I haven't forgotten a thing." Melissa reached back and patted my hand like I was a child. "Last week you called David Henry. And remember when you couldn't find your medication? The one you take every single day." Lies, all lies. I had never called my son by his father's name, and my missing medicine, it had magically reappeared after Melissa's last visit. "This is ridiculous," I said sharply. "It's my birthday. Take me home." "This is your new home, Mom," David said firmly. "We've already moved some of your things. The staff is waiting for you." As they led me inside, I couldn't help but notice every detail: the flowers I'd chosen for the lobby, the cozy seating areas, the hidden security measures I'd personally approved. My creation, my investment, and now, apparently, my prison. "This is Mrs. Henderson," David said, gesturing to a kind-faced woman in a navy suit. "She'll take good care of you." Rebecca Henderson, the administrator. She reported directly to me every 2 weeks, but we'd never met in person. She only knew me by my voice. "Welcome to Golden Sunset," Rebecca said politely, though I saw confusion flicker in her eyes at how my family treated me. David handed her a folder. "Here's Mom's information. The doctor's evaluation confirming early-stage dementia is on top." My blood ran cold. "What doctor?" I'd never been diagnosed with anything. "I need to speak with my lawyer," I said firmly. Melissa's smile tightened. "Martha, you gave David power of attorney last year for your protection." Another lie, one I would never agree to. "Well, Mom, we've got to run," David said, glancing at the Rolex I'd given him last Christmas. "We'll visit soon." They both hugged me, a performance for Rebecca's benefit. But as they turned to leave, I heard Melissa whisper, "How long before we can put the house on the market?" "The lawyer said Monday," David replied softly, not realizing I could hear. The doors shut behind them, and I stood frozen in the lobby of my own building, abandoned on my birthday by the very son I had raised. "Mrs. Wilson, would you like to sit down? You look pale," Rebecca asked gently. I straightened my spine, the years of tough negotiations sliding back into place like armor. My voice dropped its fragile act. "Miss Henderson," I said, my tone sharp and steady, "we need to have a private conversation in your office." Her eyes widened as she heard the change. I was no longer the weak old woman they thought I was. "You have no idea who I really am," I said, steel in my words. "My son was about to learn a hard lesson. Ever underestimate your mother, especially when she owns the very building you just tried to lock her inside." Rebecca Henderson's eyes widened as we sat in her office. My office, really. When the door clicked shut behind us, it sounded less like privacy and more like the lock snapping shut on David's little scheme. "Mrs. Wilson, I don't understand," Rebecca said. "Please, call me Martha," I told her, slipping off my reading glasses and reaching into my purse. "And I think this will clear things up." I pulled out my phone, not the one David knew about, the other one, the secure one. With a quick scan of my fingerprint and face, the screen lit up, and I opened an encrypted email app. My family always laughed when I fiddled with technology. Oh, look, Mom's trying to figure out her smartphone again. If only they knew I'd invested in 3 tech startups last year. I turned the phone so Rebecca could see. On the screen was our email chain from just last week, her name and mine discussing improvements, staff bonuses, and quarterly profits. Her jaw dropped. "You're Malini Ross," she whispered, using the business name I always signed with. "In the flesh," I said calmly. "I've owned Golden Sunset, along with 12 other properties, for nearly 5 years. My late husband taught me plenty, but I built this empire on my own." Rebecca sank back in her chair. "And my son," I continued, anger bubbling up again. "The so-called dementia diagnosis. Fake, just part of a careful little plan he and Melissa cooked up to steal what they think is my modest estate. My house, my savings. They have no idea." I waved a hand around the room. "This place alone brings in over $2 million a year." Rebecca studied me. "Why keep it secret from your own family?" I looked out the window, where residents sat laughing in the garden, faces warm in the summer sun. "Henry always managed our money. After he died, David rushed in to help, but I saw the way he and Melissa lived, always spending more than they had, always hungry for more. I decided to protect myself. So, I built my ventures in private." Rebecca nodded slowly. "What do you want me to do?" A smile tugged at my lips. "3 things. First, I'm staying here, but not as some patient with dementia. I'll be here as the owner undercover, reviewing the quality of care." "Consider it done," she said quickly. "Second," I continued, "I need all security footage from today. David's little speech about my condition will serve as evidence against the phony papers he filed." Rebecca grabbed a notepad. "We keep footage for 90 days. I'll have it pulled and secured immediately." "Perfect," I said. "And third, I need an ally. Someone who knows exactly what I'm up against." "You have the entire staff at your disposal." "Mrs. Wilson Melly Martha," she stumbled. "Martha is fine," I said, "but I need someone specific. A resident here named Catherine Parker." Rebecca blinked. "The former district attorney. She moved in 6 months ago." I nodded. "We've never met, but I followed her career. She's brilliant. Spent decades fighting elder fraud cases. I want her as my roommate." Rebecca's professional mask cracked. "You own the premium private suites. Why would you want to share a room?" "Because David and Melissa would get suspicious if I was given special treatment. I need to look like just another resident while I gather evidence." Before she could answer, a knock came at the door. A young nurse peeked in. "Sorry to interrupt, Miss Henderson, but Mr. Wilson is on the line. He wants to know if his mother has settled in, and if she's still asking to leave." My jaw tightened. "Already checking up on me." "Tell him," I said firmly, "that his mother is tired from the emotional day. She's resting comfortably. She seems confused, but accepting." The nurse nodded and left. Rebecca turned back to me, her eyes sharper now. "You're going to fight back." "With everything I have," I said. "David and Melissa chose the wrong woman to underestimate. By the time I'm through, they'll wish they'd just taken me to Giovanni's for lunch." I stood, straightened my pearl necklace, and looked around with new purpose. "Now, let's tour my facility. I want to meet my new roommate and start planning." As we walked through the hallways, staff and residents greeted Rebecca warmly. I watched everything with fresh eyes, not as the owner concerned about profit margins, but as someone whose survival now depended on the care inside these walls. "You know," I said quietly as we reached the East Wing, "when I bought this place, it was just another investment. I never thought I'd end up living here myself." Rebecca matched my pace, her expression thoughtful. I paused in the hallway, watching an elderly man in the solarium carefully tending to orchids. His hands were twisted with age, yet he moved with a gentleness that made the flowers seem to bloom under his touch. For the first time that day, I felt something unexpected. Maybe it wasn't an accident I ended up here. Maybe this place needs me as much as I need it, and together, we're going to see justice served. I smiled as a woman approached, sharp eyes, silver hair neatly pinned back, posture as straight as a judge's gavel. Catherine Parker. If my research was right, my new roommate, my new ally. "Wait," I whispered, placing a hand on Rebecca's arm before the introduction. "If you believe me, if you truly believe what I'm saying, then do me one favor. Tell anyone following this story to subscribe for the next chapters. Trust me, they won't want to miss what's coming." I gave Rebecca a determined smile. then stepped forward to greet Catherine. "Martha Wilson," I said, holding out my hand. "I believe we're going to be roommates." Her grip was firm, her gaze sharp. "Former District Attorney Parker," she said with a small, amused smile. "Though around here, most just call me Catherine, or that nosy old lady who asks too many questions." I liked her instantly. Rebecca excused herself to handle the paperwork, leaving Catherine and me in the sunlit common area. Residents sat nearby, some playing cards, some reading, others dozing in oversized chairs. The room looked peaceful, but I knew better. Beneath the calm was the sting of betrayal that had landed me here. "So," Catherine said, stirring her tea, "Rebecca mentioned you requested me specifically. That's unusual for a woman who's supposedly suffering from dementia." My brows rose. "She told you." "Not everything," Catherine admitted, "but just enough to pique my curiosity. 30 years prosecuting elder abuse cases has taught me to notice when something doesn't add up. Your son drops you off here on your birthday with suspicious paperwork, and suddenly, our administrator is treating you like royalty. Forgive me, but I'm intrigued." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "What I'm about to tell you stays between us. For 10 minutes. I laid out the truth, the company I'd built in secret, my ownership of the facility, David's lies, and the fake dementia diagnosis." Catherine didn't interrupt once, but her expression darkened with every word. "The audacity," she muttered finally, shaking her head. "Your own son? Money changes people," I said bitterly. "Or maybe it just shows who they really are." Catherine studied me, her gaze sharp. "You don't look surprised by his betrayal." "Hurt, yes, but not shocked." Her words struck home. I glanced down at my hand, still steady, despite everything. David was always ambitious. When Henry was alive, he kept him grounded. But after the funeral, things changed. David started circling closer, asking about my finances, suggesting I sell the house because it must hold too many painful memories. My voice hardened. "And Melissa, she didn't marry David for who he was. She married him for what she thought he could be. I saw it from the start, the way she pushed him, always wanting more. Henry gave them the down payment for their house as a wedding gift. 6 months later, they were asking for money to renovate. A memory flashed in my mind, David as a little boy, perched on Henry's lap, both of them laughing as they glued tiny wings onto model airplanes. Henry would swoop the finished planes around the living room, making dive-bombing noises until David squealed with joy. My throat tightened. When had that sweet child grown into the man who could abandon me on my birthday? "Martha," Catherine's voice pulled me back. I blinked quickly, pushing away the sting in my eyes. "Sorry, it's been a day." "Indeed it has," Catherine said gently. "But now you need a plan. What evidence do we have?" "The security footage from today, the falsified medical records, and I have proof that David doesn't hold power of attorney." "Good start," Catherine nodded, "but we'll need more. Emails or texts between David and Melissa would be ideal. And you'll need to establish your mental competency beyond any doubt." "I've already contacted my attorney," I told her. "He's arranging for an independent evaluation." Her eyes lit with approval. "Smart. Most people in your shoes would be too shaken to think so clearly." I gave a grim smile. I didn't build a real estate empire by falling apart in a crisis. Just then, a staff member stepped into the room, announcing afternoon activities. Residents began drifting toward the recreation hall. Catherine rose gracefully to her feet, her sharp eyes glinting. "Come on, Rumi," Catherine said with a grin. "Let's get you settled. We can finish our planning in private." The room we shared wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. 2 twin beds with flowery blankets, a couple of nightstands, 1 dresser we had to share, and a small sitting area by the window that looked out over a neat little garden. My suitcase sat at the foot of one bed, packed not by me, but by David and Melissa. As I unzipped it, my stomach sank. Inside were mostly nightgowns, slippers, and loose everyday clothes. Not a single business outfit. Nothing that showed me as a strong, capable woman. The message was clear. They already saw me as weak and dependent. When I checked for my jewelry, I muttered under my breath. Only my everyday pieces were there. The expensive ones, the diamond tennis bracelet, Henry's mother's emerald ring, were missing. "Write it all down," Catherine said firmly, handing me a notepad. "Every item that's missing, every word they say. Build your case carefully." I nodded and began jotting things down while she settled in by the window. "You know," she said, "I've handled plenty of cases like this. Kids trying to take advantage of their parents. But you," she smiled, "you're one of the few I've seen ready to fight back." I stopped writing and looked at her. This isn't just about me. It's about principle. No one should be tossed aside like yesterday's garbage just because they've gotten older. Amen to that, Catherine said with a nod. Now, tell me about your son. What drives him? What are his weak spots? For the next hour, I painted a picture of David, his sharp mind ruined by impatience, his hunger for status, his sense of entitlement. He wasn't always like this, I added softly. There was a time he was thoughtful, even kind. I can't help but wonder, where did I go wrong? Catherine reached over and patted my hand. We all ask ourselves that as parents, but their choices, those belong to them. Your job now is to protect yourself. As evening crept in, a nurse popped her head in. Mrs. Sullivan, you've got a phone call with your son at 7. After she left, Catherine leaned close. Remember, she whispered, you're playing a part now. Confused, compliant. Can you pull it off? I straightened my back. I've faced sharks in boardrooms across New England. I think I can handle one phone call with my son. Good, she said. Every conversation is a chance to learn something. When the phone rang, I braced myself. David's voice poured through the line, smooth, warm, caring. A performance worthy of Broadway. How are you feeling, Mom? Settling in, okay. I wanted to snap at him, to call out his act. Instead, I let my voice wobble. I suppose so, David. This morning I was in my own home, and now I let my words trail off with just the right tremble. Across the room, Catherine gave me an approving nod while pretending to read. I know it's an adjustment, David said smoothly, but it's for the best. The doctor was clear. Melissa and I are getting your house ready for the market. Prices in your neighborhood are sky high right now. My blood boiled. Not even a full day had passed, and already they were planning to sell the colonial Henry and I had poured decades of love into, the house David grew up in. But my house? I added confusion to my voice. Where will I live when I go home? There was a pause. Mom, Golden Sunset is your home now. We talked about this. It's the best place for someone with your challenges and my things, my memories. I pressed. We're keeping the important stuff, he said quickly. Photos, keepsakes, the rest. Well, you always said you wanted to downsize. I closed my eyes, picturing Melissa fingering my antique silver tea service, probably imagining it already on her dining table. Dropping my voice to a whisper, I asked, David, where's my jewelry box? The one with Grandma Wilson's emerald ring. I can't find it. Silence stretched on the other end. It's safe, Mom, David said, his tone slick and practiced. We've put all your valuables in our safe deposit box. You wouldn't want something precious to get stolen at the facility, right? Theft, plain and simple. I shot a look at Catherine. She was scribbling furiously in her notepad, her expression as sharp as a hawk spotting prey. I suppose that makes sense, I said, my voice small, pretending to agree. Will you bring it when you visit? I'd really like to see it. Sure, Mom, David replied a little too quickly, almost tripping over his words. Hey, listen, I've got to run. Melissa and I are meeting a real estate agent for dinner. You rest up, okay? We'll visit this weekend. The line clicked dead before I could answer. I lowered the phone onto the receiver with deliberate care, though my real urge was to hurl it across the room. Catherine closed her notepad with a snap. Well, she said dryly, if we needed proof of intent, that call gave us plenty. I walked to the window, watching the last rays of sun melt into the gardens below. He's selling my house already. He's taken my jewelry. He didn't even ask if I needed anything. That call was recorded by the facility's system, Catherine reminded me, leaning back in her chair. Another piece of evidence. It's not enough, I said, turning toward her, anger simmering beneath my calm tone. I need to see what they're doing in my home, what they're taking. Catherine raised one eyebrow. And you've got someone who can help with that. A slow smile spread across my face. As a matter of fact, I do. The next morning, after a surprisingly decent breakfast, scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, and coffee that wasn't half bad, I excused myself. The facility had an old-fashioned phone booth tucked near the lobby, a detail I'd personally insisted on years ago during renovations. Many residents had preferred handsets to fiddly cell phones, and at that moment, I was grateful for it. I slipped inside, shut the door, and dialed. Santiago Security. A crisp voice answered. This is Martha Wilson, I said quietly, lowering my voice. Put me through to Miguel. Within moments, his familiar voice filled the line. Mrs. Wilson, what can I do for you? I quickly laid out my situation. As I spoke, I could hear the shift in his tone from surprise to outrage to calm, determined focus. So, You need surveillance on your house, he said at last. Consider it done. I'll have my best people there within the hour. They'll document every single thing removed, and they'll patch into the security system you already have installed. The corners of my mouth lifted. David had no idea about those cameras ones I'd had quietly installed after noticing a few misplaced trinkets whenever Melissa visited. Thank you, Miguel. And one more thing. I need a secure phone, something untraceable. Can you have one delivered here? Absolutely. Maria will bring it personally. She can pose as your niece visiting. When the call ended, relief and resolve pulsed through me. I wasn't as powerless as David believed. Back in the common room, I found Catherine deep in conversation with a distinguished-looking gentleman. His posture was stooped with age, but when he rose to greet me, his height and presence still commanded respect. Martha, meet Judge Walter Simmons, Catherine said warmly. Walter, this is my new roommate, Martha Wilson. The man took my hand with old-fashioned courtesy, his grip surprisingly strong. A pleasure, Mrs. Wilson, Catherine added with a pointed look. Martha's here involuntarily. Understanding flickered in the judge's eyes. Ah, one of those situations. Walter spent 40 years on the bench, Catherine explained, family court included. He's seen more inheritance disputes than either of us can count. Walter gave a dry smile. That's a polite way of putting it. I presided over hundreds of guardianship cases. Funny how many adult children suddenly discover their parents are incompetent, right after a large sum of money or property is involved. And now, you're here, I observed gently. A shadow crossed his face. After my wife passed, my daughter thought this place was best for me. She lives in California. Busy career, convenient for her. His voice softened, then brightened with a practiced ease. But I've found purpose here offering informal legal advice to fellow residents. Catherine leaned toward me. Judge Simmons might be another valuable ally. By mid-afternoon, I'd met several more residents, each with skills that made my eyebrows rise. A retired banker who still had contacts in high finance, a social worker who'd spent decades fighting elder abuse cases, a sharp-eyed woman who had once been a private investigator and still spoke like one. Golden Sunset, I realized, wasn't just a retirement home. It was an untapped well of wisdom, resilience, and unfinished fights. Your own personal senior citizen, Ocean's 11, Catherine joked as we walked the manicured grounds later. The scent of roses drifting through the air, all with axes to grind against the families who underestimated them. For the first time since arriving, I really laughed. It rang out, light and genuine, surprising even me. I never imagined I'd find allies here, I admitted. That's the thing about places like this, Catherine said, sweeping her hand toward the rows of benches and blooming hedges. Society thinks we're finished, that we've outlived our usefulness. They forget wisdom and experience don't disappear with age. If anything, they sharpen. Her words settled into me like a warm stone, grounding me. For the first time in days, hope began to outweigh fear. As promised, Miguel's employee arrived that afternoon. Maria slipped into Golden Sunset, carrying a tote bag and a warm smile, playing the part of my concerned niece so well that even Rebecca was fooled. She hugged me tightly, murmuring how much she'd missed me. And while her arms were still around me, she pressed something into my hand. I looked down to see a smartphone hidden inside a discreet case that looked like nothing more than an old-fashioned leather address book. To anyone else, it was harmless. To me, it was a lifeline. That evening, Miguel's first report buzzed onto the hidden phone. The update made my stomach twist. David and Melissa had spent hours at my house with a real estate agent. They hadn't wasted a single day. Boxes were already filling the living room. And worst of all, one of Miguel's men had snapped a photo of Melissa wearing my diamond tennis bracelet like it had always been hers. She looked smug as she pointed movers toward my antique secretary desk, Henry's grandmother's heirloom, worth thousands. I showed the photos to Catherine, my hands trembling with rage. She didn't look surprised, only steely. Document everything, she said firmly. Every bracelet, every desk, every smug smile. Remember, Martha, we're playing the long game here. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. She was right. They think they've got all the time in the world to dismantle my life. That's their weakness, overconfidence. That night, lying in a bed that wasn't mine, staring at a ceiling that wasn't familiar, I spoke softly into the dark as though others could hear me. If you're following my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from and how old you are. Comment below and like this video if you're standing with me in this fight. Catherine, already tucked into her own bed, turned her head, and gave me a look. You've done that twice, now spoken to invisible people. Should I be worried about your mental state after all? I laughed and shook my head. Just a quirk. I like to imagine my life as a story someone else might learn from. Catherine's lips curved into a sly smile. Well, if people are listening, I hope they're taking notes, because what we're about to do is going to be a masterclass in justice served cold. Her words stayed with me as I drifted to sleep, the first spark of hope warming me since my birthday. A week slipped by at golden sunset, each day carefully divided between playing the part of the confused old woman and secretly building my case. David visited twice in that time, both appearances short and perfunctory. He'd pat my hand, speak to me slowly and loudly as if I'd gone deaf overnight, and cut off any questions I asked about my home. Don't worry about that, Mom, he said on his second visit, his eyes flicking to his watch. Melissa and I have everything under control. I smiled sweetly, nodding as though I believed him, while in truth, every word he spoke was another nail in his coffin. That second visit, he brought Jenny, my 18-year-old granddaughter. From the moment she hugged me, I felt the difference. Her arms clung tight, her eyes brimmed with worry, not calculation. Grandma, I don't understand why you're here, she whispered, leaning close while David stepped outside to take a call. You seemed fine at Easter. I squeezed her hand. Jenny had always been different from her parents, gentler, less obsessed with money and appearances. While David and Melissa pushed her toward business school, she dreamed of studying environmental science and spent weekends volunteering at animal shelters. There was good soil in her heart. Things aren't always what they seem, sweetheart, I said carefully. How are things at home? Jenny bit her lip, glancing toward the door before answering. Weird, Mom's been wearing your jewelry. She said you gave it to her. And they've been moving furniture out of your house. Dad says it's just being staged for sale. But she trailed off. But what? I prompted gently. Her eyes flicked back to mine. I heard them arguing last night. Mom wants to use the money from your house to buy a vacation home in Florida. Dad thinks they should invest it. They're already spending it, Grandma. Her voice broke. Like you're already gone. I finished her thoughts softly. Like I'm already gone. Tears welled in Jenny's eyes. I told them it wasn't right. Dad said I don't understand adult responsibilities. Mom said you're being taken care of better here anyway. Her gaze swept over the bland paintings on the wall and the rows of mismatched chairs. But this isn't your home. I felt a decision take shape. Jenny was young, but her heart was steady. Could I risk pulling her into this fight? Jenny, I whispered, if I needed your help with something important, something secret, could I trust you? Her eyes widened, curiosity lighting up her face. Of course, Grandma, anything. Next time you visit, I want you to bring me a photo album, the blue one from the shelf in my study. Tell your father it's for a school project about family history. She nodded quickly. The blue album. Got it. But why, Grandma? Before she could finish, David's voice rang through the room as he returned, phone in hand. We need to go. Your mother's waiting at the house. The realtor's coming for measurements. Jenny gave my hand one last squeeze before she stood. I'll bring it, Grandma. I promise. I watched her walk away, a flicker of hope tightening my chest. Back in our room, Catherine was waiting, perched by the window like a hawk. Well, she asked. I think I have another ally, I said quietly. My granddaughter. Jenny seems troubled by what they're doing. Catherine narrowed her eyes. Be careful. Family loyalties run deep. Kids side with their parents more often than not. Jenny's different, I insisted. She has Henry S. Moral compass for the first time. Catherine didn't argue. She only gave me a long, thoughtful look, as though weighing my words, before finally nodding. What's in the blue album? Catherine asked, always quick to spot the important stuff. I gave a small smile. Nothing sentimental, I said. It's where I keep the hard copies of my most important papers. The real power of attorney I gave to my lawyer Thomas Blackwell, not to David, and photos of my jewelry with the insurance papers that prove what each piece is worth. If any of it's been sold, that's grand theft. Catherine looked impressed. You really did prepare for this possibility. Not for this exact mess, I admitted. But 40 years in real estate taught me to keep ironclad records for everything of value. I let out a tired sigh. The weight of the betrayal hit me again. I never imagined I'd have to use my own records against my son. That evening I joined a bridge game with Catherine, Judge Simmons, and Harriet Goldstein, the retired private investigator. While we played, their conversations slowly pulled out useful details. My family, my background, and whether I actually seemed sharp or not. Harriet told a story about 3 siblings who schemed to declare their mother incompetent after she won the lottery. By the time I finished my work, Harriet said with a grin, "Those kids were lucky she didn't press charges. She moved to Boca Raton and sends them Christmas cards from her condo." Judge Simmons added, "Courts are finally taking elder fraud seriously. 20 years ago, these things were brushed off as family business. Now many DA offices have teams that handle this." Catherine chimed in quietly. "I called an old colleague at the DA's office. Strictly hypothetical conversation. Of course, but a fake medical diagnosis like that, it could have serious consequences for your son." I laid down my cards and looked at them all. "I don't want my son to go to jail," I said softly. "I want justice, not vengeance." Judge Simmons studied me with kind, steady eyes. "Martha," he said, "people who do this don't usually stop at one victim. If he faces no consequences, what's to stop him from trying the same thing on someone else?" His words landed heavy. This wasn't just personal anymore. It could protect other people too. That night my secure phone buzzed with a message from Miguel. He'd sent photos from my home security cameras. David and Melissa in my study rifling through drawers. Melissa trying on my pearl necklace in front of a mirror, and David digging through file cabinets. In one image, David looked proud, holding a stack of papers that must have seemed like big bank accounts. The next shot showed his face change confusion. Then alarm when he realized the statements showed only modest savings. "They can't find evidence of my real assets," I told Catherine, as I showed her the pictures. "Everything important is tied up in my business entities." "He looks worried," Catherine said. "Financial pressure. Maybe he expected a fortune." I nodded. A plan began to form in my head. A way to squeeze information out of them and force mistakes. The next morning I asked Rebecca to set up a meeting with the facility's visiting financial advisor. But I used the meeting to do something else. I picked up the phone and, in my Martha Wilson voice, not the confused old lady act, I called the real estate agent handling my home. "This is Martha Wilson. I understand you're working with my son to sell my property." The agent sounded startled. "Mrs. Wilson, I was told you were indisposed." "Temporary," I said smoothly. "I'm calling to inform you that the property is not for sale. My son does not have authority to list it. If you were shown power of attorney documents, they are fraudulent. My attorney will be contacting you formally, but consider this a professional notice. Anyone involved could face legal consequences." After hanging up, I texted Miguel. Phase 1 initiated. By that afternoon, the storm hit. My secure phone rang. David's voice was tight, almost panicked. "Mom, the real estate agent called me. She said you told her the house isn't for sale." "What's going on?" I switched my voice up, high and trembly, playing the part. "David, is that you? Where are you calling from? This isn't the facility phone." I acted confused on purpose. "A cell phone." "Oh my, I don't understand all that technology," he stammered, trying to explain. I kept sounding fragile, and he got flustered. The more rattled he was, the more he showed his hand. I let him think I was harmless, and I let him panic. That was exactly what we needed. A friendly woman let me use her phone to call about my house, and the whole thing felt stranger by the minute. Bhaktas, strangers walking through rooms, people I didn't expect rifling around my life. "Mom," David's voice said, tight with forced patience, "we talked about this. You're living at Golden Sunset now. The house is too much for you to maintain." "But it's my house," I said, my voice trembling. "Henry and I bought it. I don't want to sell." He brushed me off. "It's for the best, Mom. Listen, I've got to go. We'll talk when I visit tomorrow." After he hung up, I turned to Catherine, who'd been listening on speakerphone. "He's coming tomorrow, earlier than planned," I said. "Good," she replied with that satisfied look. "He's rattled. People make mistakes when they're rattled." The next day David came alone. His usual neat look frayed, dark circles under his eyes, fingers always checking his phone. "Mom," he blurted, "we need to talk about the house." I put on my innocent face. "Which house, dear?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. "Your house, Mom. You called the real estate agent yesterday." "Did I?" I tilted my head and played confused. "I get mixed up sometimes. That's why I'm here, right?" He wiggled, then tried to push the sale. "We need the money for your care," I said, slowly and loudly for effect. "But I thought Medicare and my pension covered that." His frown gave him away. "Who have you been talking to about this?" he asked. "Nice people here. We play cards and chat." He leaned in whispering, "Mom, stop interfering. You're not thinking clearly." Remember the doctor? Which doctor? I asked. I'd like to meet him. For a second, I saw panic cross his face before he forced come Dr. Richter. He said, by the time he left, he was already on his phone in the hallway. She's asking questions. No, she doesn't suspect. We have to move faster. Catherine, pretending to nap, opened one eye and smiled. You know how to push his buttons. Learned from Henry, I said. Miguel's next update at dinner made it worse. David and Melissa had been arguing in their car outside my house, and Melissa had called a jewelry appraiser about pieces she wanted to sell. They're desperate, Catherine said, selling your jewelry, rushing the house sale. If they think you're a problem, they might try something harsh, transfer you to a place with less say, or increase meds. I nodded. Then we speed up. I turned toward the empty air and, because old habits die hard, I thanked anyone following my story and asked them to subscribe so they wouldn't miss what came next. Catherine smirked at my habit of talking to invisible audiences, but she agreed. Now let's plan how to trap your son in his own lies. 3 days later, Jenny arrived alone with the blue photo album, and when she handed it to me, it felt heavy in my lap more than paper. Heavy with possibility. She'd used a weekend shift at the coffee shop as cover and slipped away without her parents noticing. They didn't question it, she whispered, sinking down beside me in the garden. Dad's been arguing with Mom about money. Some man called about jewelry. Melissa wants to sell something about provenance and insurance. I hid my smile. Miguel's man at the jewelry shop had done his job. I lowered my voice and put my hand on the album. Jenny, I said gently, what I'm about to tell you might be hard to hear, but I need you to know the truth. For the next 30 minutes, I told Jenny everything. No masks, no confusion, no act. Not the helpless old woman her parents described, but the businesswoman who had built and protected her empire. I showed her proof from the blue album, deeds to my properties, Golden Sunset included, the real power of attorney naming my lawyer, Thomas Blackwell, not David, and insurance records for my jewelry collection. As she flipped through the pages, Jenny's face changed from shock to disbelief, and finally to anger. They lied to me, she whispered, her voice shaking. They said you didn't even recognize family sometimes. Dad looked me straight in the eye and told me this was what you wanted. Tears brimmed in her eyes. I squeezed her hand. People will say almost anything when money's involved. Jenny's chin lifted, her expression hardening in a way that reminded me so much of Henry. What are you going to do? Expose the truth, I said, but carefully. If they realize I'm building a case, they might do something drastic. I want to help, she said firmly. I hesitated. It could drag her into the middle of a storm no teenager should face. This might put you at odds with your parents. They did that themselves when they lied to me, she shot back. Grandpa always said, doing the right thing isn't supposed to be easy. Pride swelled in my chest. Your grandfather would be so proud of you right now. So we made a plan. Jenny would act as my eyes and ears at the house, keeping track of what items were disappearing, listening in on conversations, and searching for the fraudulent medical papers and power of attorney David had waved around. I know where Dad keeps important documents, she said. His office safe. Combinations, his birthday and Christmas. Not exactly clever. When it was time for her to leave, Jenny hugged me tight. I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have questioned things sooner. You're questioning them now, I told her softly. That's what matters. Later, I joined Catherine, Judge Simmons, and Harriet for what looked like an innocent therapy group but was really our strategy session. Today we had a new face, Dr. Eleanor Patel, the facility's medical director. Rebecca had carefully vetted her, and now she was part of our circle. I've reviewed the medical records supposedly from this Dr. Richter, Dr. Patel said, her voice steady but grim. The tests don't follow any accepted protocol, and the listed symptoms don't match any form of dementia I've seen in 30 years. Can you run your own assessment? Catherine asked. Something solid we can use in court. I've already scheduled a full evaluation with a top neurologist, Dr. Patel replied. He's a respected expert witness in competency cases. Perfect, Judge Simmons said. Medical proof will be key to breaking that fraudulent power of attorney. Harriet looked up from her notes. My bank contact says David tried to get into your safe deposit box yesterday. He brought the phony papers, but the manager remembered your instructions. No one but you, no matter the paperwork. He left empty-handed. I nodded, relief washing over me. My old precautions were paying off. David was running out of options. The house sale was stalled. He couldn't touch my accounts or safe deposit box. And without proper paperwork, even the jewelry was useless to him. Which brings us to the next step, Catherine said, sliding a calendar onto the table. Thanksgiving is 2 weeks away. Martha thinks it's the perfect time to spring our trap. A family holiday, Judge Simmons mused. Symbolic, more than symbolic, I said. David and Melissa always host. This year, he told me they're expecting 30 guests, family, friends, his boss, and several potential clients. It's his annual show of success. The perfect audience, Harriet added with a sly smile. Exactly, I confirmed. David values his reputation above all else. If the truth comes out, they're his lies, his greed. The forged medical papers, it will ruin him in the one place he cares most, in front of his peers. But how do we get you there? Dr. Patel asked. You're supposed to be too impaired to leave the facility. I smiled. That's where you come in. A therapeutic day pass, familiar surroundings to stimulate memory, all part of treatment. You'll back it up with your notes. Plausible, Dr. Patel agreed. And I'll drive her, Catherine offered, as her support companion from the facility. We spent the next hour ironing out every detail. By the end, our little therapy group had turned into a war council. The plan was set. Thanksgiving would not be David's showcase of success, it would be the stage for his downfall. That evening, just as we expected, David called. His voice sounded tight and controlled. Mom, how are you doing today? I answered in my practiced, confused way, asking about his day, and then pretending to forget his answer a moment later. Then I tried out the idea Rebecca had suggested. David dear, when is Thanksgiving? I asked, sounding genuinely puzzled. The nice doctor here said something about me visiting family. There was a pause. Thanksgiving. That's in 2 weeks, Mom. Oh, will I be home by then? I added, putting hopeful tremble in my voice. The silence stretched longer. Mom, Golden Sunset is your home now. Remember, we've talked about this, he said. I kept pushing gently. The nice lady doctor here said I could visit for Thanksgiving. She called it a therapeutic pass for familiar surroundings. David's tone sharpened. I should speak with her about that. I'm not sure it's a good idea, Mom. The house will be full of guests. It might be overwhelming. I let my voice drop to a small, disappointed sigh. Oh, I understand. I'll just stay here alone for Thanksgiving, then. The emotional tug worked exactly as we planned. He sighed heavily and said he'd talk to Melissa and call back. I exchanged a small, satisfied look with Catherine. He'll agree, I whispered. He won't risk looking like the son who left his mother alone on Thanksgiving. An hour later, David called back with a forced cheer. Good news, Mom. We figured it out. You can come for Thanksgiving dinner. The facility can arrange transportation, right? I think my friend Catherine might drive me. She's alone for Thanksgiving too, I said casually, mentioning Catherine as if she were just a friendly neighbor. She's very nice, used to be a lawyer. I let the detail hang there. We play cards and talk about our children, I added, letting him imagine we'd been sharing stories about how families handle money. He tried to reassure me with stiff, careful words about doing everything right. I cut the call off with a little flourish. Oh, Catherine's calling me for bingo. I need to go. And hung up before he could press further. Catherine grinned. Good. An anxious opponent makes mistakes. Over the next week, Jenny kept me updated. David was frantically calling the real estate agent, pushing to close the sale before Thanksgiving. He'd also been talking to lawyers, probably trying to challenge the bank's refusal to let him into my safe deposit box. Worst of all, Jenny overheard a conversation where David and Melissa talked about moving me to another facility, one with stricter rules and stronger medication protocols. They might sedate you, Grandma, she said, trembling with anger. So you can't ask questions. The words chilled me, but I kept my face calm for Jenny's sake. That won't happen, I told her. Our plan is almost ready. That night I messaged my attorney, Thomas Blackwell. Accelerate timeline, potential transfer risk. He replied immediately. All documents prepared. Court date set for Monday after Thanksgiving. Judge Kutha presiding. I showed Catherine, and we both felt the weight of what was coming. We had to get through Thanksgiving first. Am I nervous? Catherine asked later. Not about exposing David. He deserves it, I thought. I was nervous about the deeper truth, that my own son could toss me aside for money. Catherine squeezed my hand. Family can hurt you like no one else, she said. But family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who stands by you. I looked around at my small, unlikely family. Catherine, Judge Simmons, Harriet, Dr. Patel, Rebecca, Miguel, and Jenny, and felt a fierce, steady warmth. Perhaps Catherine was right. Family could take many forms. The day before Thanksgiving, Dr. Patel brought the neurologist's report. Perfect scores across the board, she said with a relieved smile. There is no evidence of dementia or cognitive impairment. In fact, he noted your exceptional mental acuity for any age. I received the official paper with a quiet smile. One more piece of our puzzle, I told the group. That night, lying in bed, I found myself addressing my invisible audience, again because old habits die hard, and because it felt good to imagine people out there watching and rooting for me. If you're following along, I told the empty room in my head, thank you. We're almost ready. Thanksgiving will tell the rest. If you've been following along with my story, make sure you're subscribed and share this with someone who might need it. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and I'll finally face the son who tried to throw me away. Your support means everything right now, because this is the hardest conversation of my life. That night, Catherine zipped up a small overnight bag for our Thanksgiving adventure and shook her head at me. There you go again, talking to your imaginary audience. Maybe we should have tested you for more than dementia. I laughed, the sound loosening some of the fear that had been sitting in my chest. Maybe I'm just rehearsing, I teased. One last practice of my confused mother act before the big reveal. Are you ready? Catherine asked, her voice suddenly serious. My mind drifted to David as a child, the little boy who made me glitter-covered Mother's Day cards, the teenager who blasted music too loud, the young man who filled me with pride at his graduation. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost that boy to greed and selfishness. I lifted my chin. Yes, I'm ready to reclaim my life and my dignity, and maybe, just maybe, help my son reclaim his conscience. I laid out my outfit for the next day, an elegant blue silk dress Jenny had secretly brought from my closet, paired with pearls replicas Miguel had crafted to replace the real ones Melissa stole. For the first time in years, I felt calm. Tomorrow would change everything. The trap was set, and this time, the helpless old woman would be the one springing it. Thanksgiving morning arrived, crisp and golden, sunlight pouring through the autumn leaves as Catherine drove us toward David's polished suburban home. I sat in the passenger seat, smoothing my carefully styled silver hair, the blue dress shimmering softly. Nervous? Catherine asked as we turned down Maple Street, lined with large colonial houses and perfect lawns. I shook my head. Strangely calm. Feels like I've been preparing for this moment my whole life. In my purse rested a slim portfolio, my secret weapon. Inside was the neurologist's report proving I was of sound mind, paperwork confirming my ownership of Golden Sunset and other properties, evidence of the falsified power of attorney, and photographs of Melissa flaunting my stolen jewelry. Thomas Blackwell, my attorney, would arrive later, just in time for dinner. As we pulled into David's circular driveway, I took in the row of luxury cars: Mercedes, BMW, Lexus, all belonging to the colleagues and clients he was desperate to impress. The house itself, a 4-bedroom colonial with wreaths and chrysanthemums on the porch, screamed picture-perfect family. Catherine cut the engine and reminded me, stick to the plan, stay confused until the room is full. I nodded and squeezed her hand. Thank you for everything, she winked. Just doing my job as your roommate. Besides, I haven't had this much fun since I prosecuted that embezzling councilman back in '98. The front door opened before we could ring. David stood there, smiling too wide, his eyes flicking nervously between me and Catherine. Mom, happy Thanksgiving. He hugged me stiffly, then offered his hand to Catherine. And you must be Catherine, right? Mom's mentioned you. Catherine Parker, she said, gripping his hand firmly. Your mother has told me so much about you. Something in her tone made David pause, his face tightening before he recovered. All good things, I hope. Please, come in. Everyone's in the living room. The house smelled of turkey and spice, laughter and chatter spilling from the living room. Melissa, glowing in a designer dress, was directing a caterer with all the grace of a stage manager. When she spotted me, her smile faltered for just a second before she hurried over. Martha, how wonderful you could join us. She leaned in with a fake air kiss and muttered under her breath, David, you didn't tell me she'd looked this put together. His reply, the facility must have helped her. Dress wasn't as quiet as he thought. Then Jenny appeared, rushing in from the kitchen, her face glowing with warmth. She hugged me tight and whispered, everything's ready, Grandma, before turning to greet Catherine. For the next hour, I played my part, the slightly forgetful mother, smiling sweetly, repeating questions, occasionally calling someone by the wrong name. David hovered nervously, smoothing over my mistakes and steering conversations away from anything too real. To his boss, Richard, a distinguished man with silver hair, he explained. Mom's having one of her good days, and I smiled to myself, because David had no idea my best day was yet to come. Richard set his fork down with a sharp clink. Specialized care, he repeated, his brow furrowing, because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you forced your own mother into a facility to get at her money. David's mouth opened, then closed again. Melissa jumped in, her voice too high, too quick. That's absurd. We've sacrificed so much to look after Martha. We only ever wanted what's best for her. She gestured with her jeweled hand, the diamond bracelet glinting under the chandelier light. My bracelet. I folded my hands neatly in my lap, keeping my tone calm, measured. If that were true, Melissa, you wouldn't be wearing my jewelry at my Thanksgiving table, or trying to sell the rest through backdoor appraisers. Melissa's face drained of color. David stiffened, his eyes narrowing at Jenny, who sat silently, her jaw set. You, he hissed. What did you? She didn't do anything. I cut in smoothly. I'm the one who's been paying attention, and now everyone here knows it. Thomas slid another document across the table, his polished voice cutting through the tense air. Along with the medical evaluation, we've gathered bank statements, real estate filings, and evidence of forged signatures. Judge Kutha will be reviewing all of it Monday morning. The table buzzed with whispers. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying David with cool disappointment. You've built your career on trust, David. If even half of this is true. He let the sentence hang like a blade. David shoved back his chair, the legs screeching against the polished wood floor. This is a setup. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's been manipulated by these people. He pointed an accusing finger at Catherine and Thomas. Catherine's eyes glittered, sharp as steel. Funny, that's what con artists always say when they're caught. I straightened in my chair, looking directly at my son. I may be old, David, but I'm not helpless. You wanted me weak, confused, forgotten, but tonight, everyone sees the truth, and on Monday, the court will, too. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the faint clatter of a dropped fork somewhere down the table. Melissa's hands trembled against her water glass. Jenny reached under the table and squeezed my hand tight, her eyes bright with fierce pride. Shall we eat? I said finally, my voice calm, steady. After all, it is Thanksgiving. As the words hung in the air, I could see the shame crawling up David's face, his confidence slipping away with every passing second. Melissa's eyes darted around the table like a trapped animal, her fingers trembling as she wiped at her smudged makeup. We were worried about her safety, David muttered weakly, but I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. Is that why you sold my jewelry the very next day, or why you put my house on the market without even telling me? I slid a stack of photos across the table, images of Melissa trying on my necklaces, then wearing them at public events, grinning for cameras as though she owned them. Those were gifts, Melissa blurted, her voice high and desperate. Martha wanted me to have them. I raised an eyebrow and turned to the guests. Would any of you hand over family heirlooms worth more than $100,000 without a single document to prove it? Only if you weren't in your right mind, correct? Chairs shifted, eyes narrowed. David's boss leaned forward, suspicion written all over his face. I wasn't finished. Reaching into my portfolio, I laid down another set of papers. Here's something even more troubling. David doesn't even have power of attorney. This document he's been flashing around, a forgery. My true attorney is right here, Mr. Thomas Blackwell. I signed power of attorney over to him 5 years ago, and we renew it every single year. Thomas slid the original paperwork across the table, the ink crisp and undeniable. David shot up from his chair. This is all a misunderstanding. Mom's confused again. She mixes things up like the fact that I own Golden Sunset Retirement Community. His words stumbled out fast, trying to keep the mask on, but I cut him off. My voice was calm, steady, cutting through the air like a blade. No, David, Golden Sunset, and 12 other properties across New England belong to Wilson Properties LLC. I own it, not you. The silence was heavy. David's mouth opened, then closed again, his face pale. Melissa's hand flew to her throat. That's impossible. You were just a housewife. I let out a small, almost sad laugh. A housewife who spent 40 years in real estate. A housewife who found the deals, ran the numbers, built the portfolio while your father put his name on the paperwork. He may have been the face of it, but I was always the one behind the scenes. David's voice cracked with desperation. Then why keep it secret from your family? My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. Because the moment you thought I was weak, you tried to steal it all. My words hit like stones. That's when Jenny stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her face was pale, her hands clenched at her sides. "I can't believe this," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Dad, you lied. You said Grandma couldn't take care of herself. You said she needed to be locked away." David tried to reach her, his hand half lifting. "Jenny, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," she snapped, her voice trembling with fury. "I saw the papers in your safe, the ones about declaring Grandma incompetent so you could sell her house. You even had a draft deal ready with one of your golf buddies for less than it was worth. You were going to steal from your own mother." The weight of her words settled over the room like a storm cloud. Guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes fixed on David as though seeing him for the first time. Richard, once polite and detached, now stared at him with open disgust. Catherine broke the silence, her voice cool but firm. "Martha has already filed documents to invalidate the fraudulent power of attorney. There's a hearing on Monday. The police are aware of the jewelry theft, though no charges have been filed yet." "Charges?" Melissa nearly screeched, her voice cracking. "You'd press charges against your own son." I looked her square in the eye, my tone steady, but heavy with sadness. "I don't want to. That's why I'm giving David a choice." I nodded to Thomas, who laid a settlement agreement on the table. "Return everything you took, my jewelry, my keys, my financial documents. Sign this statement admitting what you did. In exchange, I won't press criminal charges." David's face twisted with disbelief. "You expect us to admit to fraud?" "I expect you to take responsibility," I replied simply. "That statement will stay private unless you ever try this again." His voice hardened, though it shook beneath the surface. "And if we refuse?" I didn't hesitate. "Then Monday, I'll ask the court to pursue every charge available. Elder fraud in Massachusetts carries real penalties. David, prison time." The silence was suffocating now, broken only by the faint ticking of the hallway clock. Guests shifted uneasily, caught in a nightmare family drama they hadn't signed up for. I softened my voice, my eyes never leaving my son's. "I don't want that, David. Despite everything, you're still my boy. I'd rather you learn from this than be destroyed by it." The fight drained out of him, his shoulders sagged, his face hollowed, and he dropped back into his chair like a man who had already lost. Melissa stared straight ahead, her tears running black tracks down her face. Richard cleared his throat, his voice awkward but kind. "Perhaps the rest of us should give the family a little privacy." One by one, the guests rose, chairs scraping against the floor, leaving behind a table that had gone colder than the untouched turkey. The guests' footsteps faded down the hallway, their whispered goodbyes carrying the weight of gossip that would no doubt spread by morning. Richard's parting words still hung in the air like smoke. "David, I'll see you in my office first thing Monday morning." The threat was clear. I sat there quietly, watching the world David and Melissa had built collapse piece by piece. It didn't bring me joy, only a deep, aching sadness that it had ever come to this. Jenny's hand settled gently on my shoulder. She didn't say much, she didn't need to. Catherine and Thomas stayed seated as silent guardians, their presence steady, ensuring nothing else spiraled out of control. Jenny finally whispered, "What happens now?" I looked across the table at David and Melissa. They were my family by blood, but in that moment, they felt like strangers. "That," I said softly, "is entirely up to them." The days that followed were like watching dominoes fall in slow motion, faced with public humiliation, legal consequences, and the undeniable truth. David and Melissa signed the settlement in Thomas's office the very next morning. Their hands trembled as their pens scratched across the paper. Neither of them looked at me. "All your jewelry will be returned this afternoon," David muttered, his voice stiff. "And the house listing has been withdrawn." "Thank you," I replied. No triumph, no gloating, just relief. This wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming what was mine and closing a wound that should never have been opened. By Monday, the court officially invalidated the fraudulent power of attorney. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, looked over her glasses at David. "You're lucky your mother is more merciful than the Commonwealth would have been. Elder fraud is something this court takes very seriously." David shrank in his seat, the fight gone out of him. 2 months later, the winter sun streamed into Rebecca Henderson's office at Golden Sunset. But this time, I wasn't there as a resident, I was there as the owner. "The new West Wing renovations are on schedule," Rebecca reported, sliding a folder toward me. "And occupancy rates are up 5% since last quarter." "Excellent," I said, scanning the numbers before glancing up. "And how are special residents?" Rebecca smiled knowingly. Catherine is still mentoring the legal aid program. Judge Simmons has started a memoir class. And Harriet, she's terrorizing the poker tables. I laughed, warmth bubbling up inside me. Though I'd returned to my own home, I visited often. These people had been my lifeline, my unexpected family. And the new program? I asked, leaning forward. The Martha Wilson Elder Advocacy Program launches next month, Rebecca said proudly. We've already identified 3 residents under financial pressure from their families. The legal team is stepping in to protect their assets. For the first time, pride outweighed pain. My ordeal had created something bigger than myself, a safety net for others. No one else would have to face what I did, not if I could help it. As the meeting ended, Rebecca hesitated. David called again yesterday. He asks every week if you'll be here. My heart twisted. What did you tell him? The truth, that I don't know your schedule. She studied me carefully. I nodded. Thank you. Outside, the January air bit at my cheeks. I walked toward my car, keys jingling in my hand, when a figure straightened from the wall near the entrance. Mom, David said. He looked different. The polished mask was gone. No tailored suit, no Rolex flashing on his wrist, just jeans, a plain wool coat, and a man who seemed smaller, somehow like life had carved pieces out of him. David, I said, stopping a few feet away. Rebecca told me you've been calling. He shoved his hands into his pockets, his breath hanging in the frosty air. I didn't think you'd answer if I called you directly. He wasn't wrong. Since Thanksgiving, the only words between us had been through lawyers. I smiled gently, holding his gaze. I know I don't have to. That's the point. I'm choosing to. For a moment, David just stood there, caught between disbelief and hope. His lips parted as if to argue, then closed again. The lines of weariness on his face softened, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years. This isn't a gift, I said, my tone firm but not unkind. It's a chance to prove to yourself, to Jenny, and maybe even to me, that you've truly changed. You'll work under Thomas's oversight, and Catherine will have full access to the accounts. Every step will be transparent. If you slip once, just once, it's over. Do you understand? He nodded quickly, almost too quickly. Yes, Mom, I understand. I won't let you down this time. His voice cracked, and he looked away, blinking hard. Don't thank me, I said softly, handing him a napkin for the frosting now smudged on his hand. Just do the work. Let your actions speak. From across the garden, Jenny's laugh rang out, warm and clear, as she teased Harriet about cheating at cards. I watched my granddaughter, my anchor, through all of this and then looked back at David. You're lucky she's giving you another chance, I murmured. I know, he whispered, following my gaze. She's the best of us. For a while, we stood in companionable silence, the spring breeze carrying the scent of lilacs through the garden. The weight between us hadn't disappeared, not yet, but for the first time in years, it felt lighter, as though we were finally learning how to carry it together. Later that evening, as candles flickered low and my friends lingered over coffee, I found myself reflecting on the past year: betrayal, pain, confrontation, justice, and now tentative healing. Life, I realized, wasn't about avoiding heartbreak. It was about what you built afterward. I wasn't just Martha Wilson, the woman who'd been nearly stripped of everything. I was Martha Wilson, the woman who fought back, who protected her dignity, who created something lasting for others. And maybe, just maybe, I was also the woman who could help her son find his way back. Would you like me to carry the story forward from here, showing how David begins working with Martha and Jenny on the properties? Or should I end it on this note of cautious hope? This isn't me forgiving you and handing out a job, I explained gently. It's a business deal. You've got real experience, and over the last 3 months, you've shown me you're serious about changing. And honestly, I'm not getting any younger. No matter what that neurologist's report claims. His face shifted through so many emotions: thankfulness, guilt, hope, all tangled together. I would never betray your trust again, he whispered. Never. I believed him, but I added firmly, this time you'll be working with me, not behind my back. You'll learn the business from the ground up. And, I said with a grin, you'll also be reporting to Jenny, who's starting as my assistant this summer. That made him laugh. A real laugh. The kind I remembered from when he was a boy. My daughter, as my boss. Now, that's poetic justice. Exactly, I chuckled. As we walked back to the party, I felt that old pull to speak to my unseen audience one last time. For those of you who've been with me since that unforgettable birthday, thank you for listening. If this story means something to you, share it with someone who needs hope. because happy endings aren't always about fixing everything there, about finding strength you never thought you had. Across the garden, Catherine caught my eye and raised a playful eyebrow. Talking to your invisible viewers again, she teased. I just smiled, peaceful now, knowing my story mattered not just to me, but maybe to others, fighting for their own dignity. It's just a habit, I told her, a way of reminding myself that our stories can send out ripples we never expect. As the sun set on my birthday, I looked around at the strange but beautiful family around me, some tied to me by blood, others by life's twists and choices. Betrayal had taught me strength, crisis had given me purpose, and standing up for myself had built something that could last even after I was gone. The Martha Wilson who was once left forgotten at Golden Sunset no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who not only owned buildings, but her own story and wanted others to own theirs too. When I leaned forward to blow out the candles, I made just one wish, that every person, no matter their age, could find the courage to say the words I had finally learned to speak. I am still here. I still matter. And I'm not done yet. That's today's story. If it touched you, leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget, share your own life lesson in the comments below.